Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Attorney Vlogger, Law for the Everyday Layman. Today we take up the rights of buyers of real estate, including condominium units, on installment basis. So if you like my videos and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. Also, please remember that this is only for educational and informative purposes and is not a substitute for proper legal advice or for studying and understanding the law. Shout out to Chief Alvin Aguilar and Deftac Philippines. If you guys want to learn more about self-defense and techniques and experiences that helped Alvin Aguilar make Deftac into the largest and best team in the Philippines, then please subscribe to their channels. Links are in the description below. Okay? Now let's talk about Republic Act 6552, otherwise known as the Maceda Law. Okay? The Maceda Law governs the sale or financing of real estate, including condominium units, which are purchased on installment basis. Okay? So this law covers both absolute sales, yung deed of absolute sales, and contracts to sell. Okay? Provided that the terms of those contracts have at least 2 installments. Okay? The purpose of the Maceda Law is to protect buyers of real estate on installments against onerous and oppressive conditions. Okay? First, let's begin with those that the law does not apply to. Okay? The Maceda Law does not apply to a sale involving industrial lots. It also does not apply to a sale involving commercial buildings or commercial lots. Does not apply to sales to tenants under agrarian reform laws. And finally, it does not apply in case the sale of real estate is made in a straight payment. Okay? One payment only. Okay? Now, let's talk about the rights of the buyer in case he has defaulted or failed to pay any installment. Okay? There are 2 classifications of rights, okay? And let's begin with the first kind, These rights will only arise, in case the buyer has paid at least 2 years worth of installments. Not just 2 installments, but 2 years worth of installments, okay? And these are the rights in case of that scenario. First, the buyer is allowed to pay the unpaid installments due without additional interest, okay? And he is given a grace period within which to do that. And what is the grace period? It is 1 month for every 1 year of installment payments made, okay? So 1 month for every 1 year of installment payments made, okay? So at the outset, the buyer, in case he has paid 2 years worth of installments, he already has at least 60 days as grace period, because in this scenario, remember, the buyer must have paid at least 2 years worth of installments, And since he has paid 2 years, and since the grace period is 1 month for every 1 year of installment payments made, then he has at least 60 days grace period, okay? However, this right to pay within the grace period can only be used once every 5 years, okay, in the life of the contract or any of its extensions, okay? Once every 5 years lang pwedeng ma-avail ang right na ito. Okay, second right, in case the contract is cancelled, the buyer gets a refund, okay? And how do we know what the refund is? The law says that the buyer will be entitled to the cash surrender value of payments equivalent to 50% of the total payments made, okay? That's the basic which he's entitled to. And in case he has made payments exceeding 5 years or after 5 years, he is entitled to an additional 5% refund, okay? For every year of payments made. 5% additional per year of payments made. So again, that's 50% of the total he has paid plus 5% for every year made after 5 years. Okay? Now, there is a limit. Okay? The refund should not exceed 90% of the total payments made by the buyer. Okay? So, the most that the buyer can get is just 90% of what he totally paid. Okay? Now, I spoke of cancellation, and when do we know that cancellation takes place? This is very important. For the students, this is a common exam question. For those that are ordinary laymen, this is very important as well because this affects your rights. Okay? So, actual cancellation will only take place within 30 days, okay, 30 days from receipt of the notice of cancellation or demand for rescission by notarial act. Okay? In other words, the notice of cancellation or the demand for rescission from the seller, it must be notarized. Okay? It must be by notarial act. If it's not notarized, that will affect the cancellation. And you will have a remedy to reinstate the contract because the cancellation is not validly done. Okay? So, the actual cancellation takes place within 30 days from receipt of the buyer of the notice of cancellation or demand for rescission by notarial act. And here's one more thing, and 30 days from full payment of the cash surrender value to the buyer. Okay? Why is that important? No? Because in the case of Leaño versus Court of Appeals, if the buyer was not given the cash surrender value, then the contract is not yet canceled. And since the contract is not yet canceled, the buyer may reinstate the contract, meaning he can pay the unpaid installments within the grace period and the contract will still continue to be effective, okay? As long as the payment is done before the actual cancellation. And again, when does actual cancellation take place? 30 days from receipt of the notice and full payment of the cash surrender value to the buyer. Okay? Now, there are two more rights for this scenario where the buyer paid at least 2 years of installments. The buyer can also sell or assign his rights to another person or to a third person. Or he can reinstate the contract by updating the account within the grace period and before actual cancellation. And the final right is at any time within the life of the contract, the buyer can pay any installment or even the full unpaid balance in advance. Okay? So the buyer has the right to pay the contract in advance. Okay? And this is the exception to the rule in Oblicon that the period should be respected because it is for the benefit of both the creditor and the debtor. Okay? If you want to learn more about that, please just watch my episode on obligations and contracts. Okay? So, but in this case, the buyer is allowed to pay in advance without any additional interest. He is also given the right to annotate or have the payments annotated on the certificate of title, whether it be a condominium certificate, transfer certificate of title, or original certificate of title. No matter what title, he can have his payment annotated. Okay? So that's the first scenario. Let's go to the second. The second scenario is when the buyer has paid less than 2 years worth of installments. So, his right here in this case is that he is just given a grace period of 60 days. Okay? 60 days counted from the due date of the last installment. Okay? 60 days pay. If it's paid, then we have no problem. But if the buyer fails to pay within the 60-day grace period, then the seller may cancel the contract after 30 days from receipt of the buyer of the notice of cancellation or the demand for rescission by notarial act. Again, this is very important. Remember, the notice of cancellation or demand for rescission must be by notarial act. And that is from receipt of that notice or demand that we count the 30 days before the contract is actually canceled. Okay? Now, this second scenario, the buyer paid less than 2 years worth of installments. He also has the right to sell or assign his rights to third persons, or he can even reinstate the contract by updating the account as long as it's done within the grace period and before the actual cancellation. And the buyer also has the right to pay the any installments or even the full price in advance without any interest. He also has that right. Okay? Now, Finally, in computing the installments made, we include the down payments, the deposits, or any other amount like for option, okay? And those amounts, no? So those will be included in the computation of the installment payments made, okay? So I hope you may have picked up a thing or two from this, because these rights are very important in order for you not to be burdened by onerous or oppressive conditions. Okay? So I hope to see you next time in another episode. Okay? See you soon. Bye.